On Mother's Day, my husband announced to a room full of people that I was pointless. He didn't use that exact word at first. He dressed it up in a joke, in one of those light, easy comments men make when they're feeling clever and safe. We were at his parents' house for brunch, the dining room table straining under platters and cut glass and the weight of everyone's opinions. I was pouring orange juice for our 8-year-old Ava when it happened. "Honestly, Mum," Daniel said, gesturing toward me with his fork, "Maya's got the easiest gig out of all of us. No deadlines, no boss, no real pressure. She just floats." He laughed. So did his father. His mother smiled in that tight way she reserved for things she knew were slightly cruel, but enjoyed anyway. The word just stuck to me like grease. I set the picture down carefully so it wouldn't slip from my hand. Ava was tracing a pattern in her syrup with a strawberry. Across the table, Daniel's younger sister, Tessa, snorted. "Please, I'd go insane if I stayed home all day," she said. "I need my brain to be used." No offense, Maya. There it was. No offense, as if that stripped the sting from it. I smiled, of course I did. I tipped my head and said, "None taken," because that was the role. Calm, gracious, unbothered. The woman who never made things awkward. Inside, something very small in me took 3 steps back and sat down. "Anyway," Daniel went on, "I take care of the hard stuff. Bills, investments, you know. She takes care of the kids and whatever. His mother topped up his coffee like he'd said something admirable. His father nodded. Tessa rolled her eyes, but not on my behalf. The words floated above the table, then sank, heavy, into the space where my life should have been visible. I glanced at the gold watch on Daniel's wrist, the one I'd bought him when his startup closed its first round. I looked at the house around us, the one whose down payment had come from my inheritance. None of them ever mentioned that part. "Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow I have a special story for you. It should have ended at brunch. It should have been nothing more than a careless comment, one of 1,000 I could file away and forgive. But that was the morning his phone lit up on the table, screen flashing with a preview of a message he didn't mean for me to read. From Liam Group. "Boys' table. Bro. At least your wife's hot. Mine thinks project management is organizing laundry." And then, just under it, the part that turned my stomach into ice. "Daniel, mine doesn't even do that. She'd be pointless if we didn't have kids." Pointless. Someone said something about the fruit salad. Someone laughed at an old story. The room kept moving, clinking, chewing, while that one word drew a red circle around my heart. I didn't confront him there, in front of his parents. That would have given the comment more power than I wanted it to have. Instead, I picked up my fork, cut my banana-streaked pancake into neat, manageable pieces, and swallowed each bite like it was a decision. I had once balanced portfolios worth more than his parents' entire net worth. I had once stayed up all night modeling risk scenarios for a firm that now had its name on 3 different skyscrapers. I had once sat in a glass office and been the person people called when they were afraid of losing millions. Now my husband thought I would be pointless without access to the school PT email list. When we got home, the flowers went in a vase by the kitchen window. The kids ran upstairs to argue about who got to choose the movie for later. Daniel collapsed on the couch, groaning. "God, my mother is exhausting," he said, loosening his tie. "Did you see the way she glared when I said we might not come next year?" I stood in the doorway, watching him. The man I had loved since we were both too young to understand what sacrifice meant. The man whose dreams I had funded, organized, and protected. "What did you mean in the group chat?" I asked quietly. He frowned. "What group chat?" "The one with your friends." "The message that popped up on the table," I said. About me being pointless if we didn't have kids. His shoulders tensed. He sat up, rubbing a hand over his face. Oh my God, you saw that? He said, half laughing, half annoyed. It was just a joke, Maya. A joke, I repeated. Yeah, that's how guys talk. You know that? He shrugged. We're just blowing off steam. You take everything so seriously. I looked at him, the expensive shirt slightly wrinkled, the watch gleaming, the faint line of a tan from a recent work retreat in Mexico I hadn't even been invited to. My gaze traced the edges of his life as he understood it. Him at the center, everything else orbiting. Is that how you see me? I asked. Pointless without the kids? He hesitated. Just long enough. Look, you're a great mom, he said. You know that. But outside that, yeah, sometimes I worry you don't have much going on. You quit your job. You don't really, I don't know, contribute. I'm just being honest. The room went very quiet, except for the hum of the fridge. I felt the old habit rise up in me, the one that wanted to explain, to defend, to remind him of the nights I ran numbers for his startup, of the checks I wrote for my inheritance, of the networking I did on his behalf, while our son napped on my shoulder. To list, like line items, the unseen labor of the last 8 years. But a different impulse slid in front of that one. I looked at him, at the man who said he was just being honest. And I thought, good. Honesty is data. Okay, I said. His brows pulled together. Okay? That's it? Yes. I took a breath that felt like stepping onto a cold floor. Thank you for telling me the truth. He relaxed, misreading the calm in my voice as surrender. Good. I don't want to fight on Mother's Day, he said, reaching for the remote. Can we just have a nice afternoon? Yes, I said again, my mind already moving several steps ahead. We can. It was strange how quiet the anger felt. Not like fire, not like shouting. More like a scalpel, precise and cold. There was grief, yes, thick in my throat. But beneath that, a clarity I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. This is what he thinks of you. Not what he says when he's scared. Not what he mutters in a bad mood. What he's comfortable telling his friends as a joke. What he's comfortable sitting in, day after day, while you rearrange your entire life around his. Pointless. I went to the kitchen, wiped a non-existent crumb from the counter, and pulled my phone from my pocket. There, in a folder I had created 3 years ago, were photos of documents, emails, and contracts, screenshots of bank transfers, copies of signatures, a quiet archive of every time I had chosen to protect my future, just in case. I hadn't expected to need it so soon. The first thing I did that night, once the kids were asleep, and Daniel was snoring beside them after, accidentally, dozing off during the movie, was open my laptop. Not the family laptop in the kitchen. My laptop. The one he thought I de-sold years ago when I didn't need it anymore. I logged in and opened the spreadsheet that had become my private ritual over the last few months. Columns of numbers, color-coded and precise. My inheritance account. The small consulting jobs I'd taken on quietly for a former co-worker. The transfers to the joint account hours, I reminded myself, but always treated like his. I adjusted formulas, plugged in updated balances and watched the cells recalculate. Even after everything I had put into Daniel's company, there was still enough left for me to breathe on my own. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're from. If this story moves you, please subscribe. Tomorrow I have a special story for you. I stared at the screen, the glow painting the dark kitchen in cool light. It wasn't about the money, not really. Money was just the shape power took when people didn't want to talk about power directly. I had power. I had just been pretending for his comfort. That I didn't. I opened another file. A draft email to the hiring manager at a boutique advisory firm downtown. We had coffee 3 weeks earlier after she messaged me on LinkedIn. I keep hearing your name in rooms you haven't been in for years. I'd laughed it off. Told her I was out of the game for now, that my hands were full. That night, I deleted the last line of the draft. Hi Claire. I hope you're well. I've been thinking about our conversation. If you're still open to it, I'd like to talk seriously about coming on board. Best, Maya, I hovered over send for a second, feeling the ghost of Daniel's likely reaction. You're overreacting. You're going to throw off our whole rhythm. Who's going to be there for the kids? The kids, I thought, deserved a mother who wasn't disappearing slowly in front of them. I hit send. The second thing I did was send a very different message, this one to a number I hadn't dialed in 6 months. Me. Hey. Are you still willing to recommend that lawyer you mentioned? The typing bubble appeared almost immediately. Sarah. Always. What happened? Me. I'll explain when I'm ready. For now, I just need her name. The next 2 weeks did not look like a movie montage. There was no upbeat music, no shots of me striding through lobbies in my best clothes while people turned to stare. It looked like sticky cereal on the floor at 7 a.m. and scheduling a Zoom interview while our son Leo built a spaceship out of couch cushions beside me. It looked like brushing my hair in the car before walking into Sarah Zalawia's office, my heart pounding so hard I could feel it in my teeth. It looked like pretending everything was normal so the kids wouldn't feel the ground shifting yet. Daniel didn't notice much at first. He was gearing up for a big pitch to potential investors people I had helped him connect with back when we were both still pretending our partnership was equal. My phone buzzed constantly with texts from him. Daniel, can you please send me that old deck from 2019? The one with the churn analysis. Daniel, also, did we ever finalize the vendor contract with Apex? Can't find it. Daniel, babe? Hello? I responded, each reply a small experiment. Me. I'll check when I have time. Me. I'm on a call right now. Later. Me. The contract is in the shared drive. You've got this. He called once, annoyed. What call? With who? Does it matter? I asked. He paused, thrown. You're usually more responsive. I've got more on my plate now, I said. You'll have to manage. He laughed, not sure if he should be offended. Okay, boss lady, he said. Don't forget who takes care of the real work around here. I hung up gently and opened the email from Claire. We'd love to have you. The role would be senior advisory principal to start. Compensation package attached. I opened the attachment. My salary would be more than Daniel's last year's income. The bonus structure made my breath catch. Luxury, I thought, had always been present in my life, but it had never really belonged to me. The house, the cars, the trips, they were always framed as his success, his reward. Even when my money paid for them, the language slid around me and landed at his feet. This would be different. This would be mine. The lawyer Sarah recommended was named Farah. She had kind eyes and a desk buried in organized chaos. On my first visit, I sat across from her with my hands wrapped around the coffee she'd offered, trying not to spill details too quickly. So, she said, flipping open a legal pad, tell me why you're here in your own words. I told her about the message. The word. Pointless. I told her about the years I'd spent raising our children, running the household and quietly tracking the finances. I told her about my inheritance, about the funds transferred into his company, about the shareholder agreement he'd put in front of me 3 years ago while promising, I'll make this worth it. You still have your copies? She asked. I slid a folder across the table. She leafed through it, her expression unreadable. You kept everything. I used to be a risk analyst, I said. I don't like surprises. Good, she replied. Because I have one for you, and it's the pleasant kind. From what I'm seeing, you're not just a supportive spouse. You are an early investor in that company. Legally. I nodded. I know. And based on the terms, she continued, eyes scanning, you have voting rights and protections he can't just wish away. Has he tried to get you to sign anything since this? Not yet, I said. But he's implied more than once that it's his business, that I don't really understand it. Farah smiled a sharp, small smile. We'll let him keep thinking that for now. She started outlining options. What separation would look like if I chose it, how the division of assets could go, what my leverage was. The numbers didn't scare me. They steadied me. This isn't about punishing him, I said at one point. I surprised myself by meaning it. I don't want to ruin his life. What is it about? She asked. Not letting him erase mine, I said. She nodded. Then we'll make sure your contributions are visible in every document from here on out. Daniel started noticing the shift in me around day 10. We were in the kitchen. He was pacing, rehearsing his pitch out loud, tossing jargon into the air like confetti. And that's why our user attention outpaces the market by, "Are you even listening?" He snapped. I heard you, I said, stirring a pot of pasta. You're leading with numbers instead of story again. They'll tune out. He blinked. Okay, Ms. Expert. I am an expert, I said calmly. Or did you forget I did this for a living before I became pointless? His head jerked up. You're still on that? I'm not on anything, I said. I just remember what's been said about me. He sighed, exasperated. I said I was sorry. No, I corrected softly. You said it was a joke. That's not the same thing. He opened his mouth, then closed it, running a hand through his hair. I don't know what you want from me, Maya, he said finally. You're acting like you've got some big secret, like you're planning something. Maybe I thought. Maybe I am. Out loud, I said, I want you to succeed on your own merit. That's all. He frowned at that, but his phone buzzed and pulled his attention away. Later that night, my own phone buzzed with a different kind of message. Claire, can you come into the office tomorrow? We'd like to finalize everything in person. Farah. Draft separation agreement ready for your review when you are. 2 weeks, I thought. 2 weeks since Mother's Day. The time between being called pointless and sitting at the edge of a different life. The day everything came together, the sky was an ordinary grey. The kids were at school. Daniel was dressed in his best suit, cologne too strong, pacing by the front door. Big day? I asked, sipping my coffee. Massive, he said, checking his watch. The investors are coming in this afternoon. If this goes well, it could change everything. It will, I agreed. He looked at me then, really looked as if seeing something different in my posture, in the way I held my mug. Why are you so calm? He asked. You're usually more nervous with me on days like this. I have my own meetings, I said. It helps. He laughed like I'd made a cute joke. Right. PTA drama? I didn't correct him. I just put my mug in the sink and grabbed my bag. Good luck, Daniel, I said, pausing by the door. Honestly, I hope they see your potential. He softened. Thanks, babe. I know I joke around a lot, but I do appreciate everything you do. You know that, right? I smiled. I know what you appreciate, I said. We'll talk later. The advisory firm's office was all glass and quiet confidence. Claire greeted me with a hug and a contract. "You're sure you're ready for this?" she asked as we sat in her office. "Yes," I said. "I've been ready for a long time." We went over the terms. The salary, the bonus, the equity component that made my pulse jump. "Given your background and the clients we want you to lead, we're also offering access to our executive residence program," she added casually. "Short-term housing for senior partners who are transitioning, I repeated. "Divorce, separation, relocation," she said gently. "You're not the first woman to walk into power from a place of being underestimated. We try to make it easier." My throat tightened. I signed the contract. When I left the building, I had a company badge in my bag and keys to a furnished apartment in a high-rise I'd driven past for years, assuming it was for other people. Power and luxury, I thought, weren't just about marble countertops and city views. They were about walking into a life you chose, not one you were assigned. Farah's office was my next stop. "The timing couldn't be better," she said, tapping a highlighted section of the separation agreement. "He's about to bring in outside investors. That means his valuation is about to be locked in on paper. We want you recognized as an early stakeholder before that ink dries." My stomach fluttered, but not with fear. "What do you need me to do?" I asked. "Be at the meeting," she said simply. I blinked. "He hasn't invited me." "He doesn't have to," she replied. "You're a shareholder. And as of this morning, thanks to a little filing I pushed through, you are now listed as an advisory principal at one of the firms their lead investor has worked with in the past." I stared at her. "You did what?" She smiled. "I told you we'd make your contributions visible." The conference room at Daniel's company was larger than I remembered. A long table, high-backed chairs, screens on the walls. Through the glass, I could see Movement Daniel at the far end animated, gesturing at a slide deck. 3 men and 1 woman sat across from him, all in suits that whispered old money. My heels clicked softly on the polished floor as I approached. One of the assistants did a double take. "Maya?" she said. "Hi, can I help you?" "I'm here for the investor meeting," I said. Her eyes widened. She glanced toward the room. Daniel turned mid-sentence, following her gaze. For a moment, his whole body went still. He recovered quickly, pasting on a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Excuse me just a second," he told the room. Then came out, closing the door behind him. "What are you doing here?" he hissed under his breath. "I'm exercising my rights as a shareholder," I said calmly, "and as an advisory principal at a firm your lead investor has worked with. You know Claire Hayes, don't you? She's on the board of one of their portfolio companies." His face paled. "You what?" "I told you I've been busy," I said. He glanced back at the room, then at me. "This is not a good time for whatever this is," he said. "You're going to embarrass me." I looked through the glass at the investors. One of them, the woman, was watching us with open curiosity. "I have no intention of embarrassing you," I said. "I'm here to make sure the story being told in that room matches the truth." He swallowed. "Maya, please, we can talk about whatever's going on later. At home." I held his gaze, remembering the way he'd laughed when they called my mothering a hobby, when his friends called me pointless. "No," I said softly. "We'll talk about it now." I opened the door and stepped inside. The room went quiet for a moment as I entered. Daniel followed, hovering at my shoulder. "Sorry for the interruption," he said quickly. "This is my wife, Maya. She was just leaving." I smiled at the investors. On the contrary, I said, I'm just arriving. The woman at the table stood, extending a hand. You must be the infamous Maya, she said. I'm Elena. We've heard a lot about your early support of this company. Daniel's head whipped toward her. You have? He asked. She nodded. Claire at Halcyon Advisory speaks very highly of you. And Farah sent over some enlightening documents this morning. Her eyes flicked to Daniel, then back to me. Please, she said, gesturing to an empty chair. Join us. I sat. Daniel remained standing for a beat, then reluctantly slid into his chair at the head of the table. Elena leaned back, folding her hands. So, she said, we were just discussing the origin story of this company. How the seed funding came together. Your husband tells it as a tale of grit and vision. I'd be interested to hear your version. Daniel shot me a warning look. I met it, then turned my gaze to the investors. My version isn't very dramatic, I said. It's mostly about spreadsheets. A small ripple of laughter went around the table. I inherited a modest sum when my grandmother passed, I continued. I was working in risk analysis at the time. When Daniel came to me with his idea, I ran projections, looked at failure scenarios, modeled best and worst case outcomes. And you still invested, one of the men said, intrigued. Yes, I said. Not because I believed he was infallible, but because I believed that with the right guidance and discipline, his vision could work. So I invested my inheritance. I also did the early financial modeling, helped negotiate the first vendor contracts, and introduced him to 2 of his original clients. I pulled a neat stack of documents from my bag and slid them across the table. These are copies of the transfers and agreements, I said, signed by both of us. Elena flipped through them, her brows lifting. And yet, she said mildly, we've seen decks that refer to you as a stay-at-home wife with no relevant experience. Daniel flushed deep red. It was simpler that way, he said quickly. Maya didn't want to be involved in the day-to-day. That's not entirely true, I said calmly. I stepped back because our children needed one parent who wasn't always at an office or on a plane. I made that choice consciously. But stepping back from the office doesn't erase the foundation I poured. The room was very still. Do you feel fairly credited? One of the investors asked. I considered lying, saying it didn't matter, saying I was just happy to be here. No, I said simply. I don't. And I suspect you might want to know that the man you about to trust with a significant sum has a pattern of overlooking the people who make his success possible. Daniel's chair scraped back. This is insane, he snapped. You're blowing up my life over one stupid text. Elena held up a hand. I'm less concerned about one text, she said, and more concerned about a culture. If you'll treat a founding investor like a PTA footnote, because she no longer fits your idea of valuable, how will you treat your team when they take maternity leave? When someone gets sick? When a key engineer wants a more flexible arrangement? Daniel's mouth opened, closed. I'm not that guy, he said weakly. You literally are that guy, I said, the words gentle, almost sad. You've told your friends I'm pointless without the kids. You've minimized my work at every turn. You've built an identity on being the one who takes care of everything, while erasing the ways others have taken care of you. His eyes flashed. And what? You're perfect. He shot back. You're just some quiet genius who decided to martyr herself. No, I said. I'm someone who tolerated being made small for too long. That's on me. But I'm done. I looked at Elena. I'm not here to sabotage your deal, I said. I'm here to make sure that if you proceed, you do it with full knowledge of who you're partnering with, and to make it clear that any narrative that erases my role will be challenged. Elena studied me for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Thank you for your honesty," she said. "We have enough to consider for now. Daniel, why don't you give us a few minutes?" He stared at her, stunned. "You're kicking me out of my own meeting. We're asking for privacy with a key stakeholder," she said evenly. "You said yourself she funded your early operations. We'd like to understand that better." He looked at me, eyes wide with something like betrayal. "You set this up?" he whispered. "No," I said quietly. "You did, the moment you decided I was pointless." He left the room. When the door closed behind him, the silence that followed felt different, less tense, more expectant. Elena folded her hands again. "Off the record," she said. "What do you want, Maya?" I knew what she was really asking. Money? Control? Revenge? "I want my share recognized," I said. "Legally, financially, publicly. I want to ensure that if I step away from this marriage, I don't step away from the value I created. And beyond this company?" She asked. I thought of the contract in my bag, the keys in my pocket, the view from an apartment I hadn't seen yet. "I want a life where my work and my worth are visible," I said. "To myself first, and then to anyone who crosses my path." She nodded slowly. "We can work with that," she said. "Farah has already outlined some options. As investors, we have no interest in burying the contributions of someone with your track record. In fact, we find it risky." A laugh slipped out of me, unexpected. "Risk analysis is my specialty," I said. "I know," she replied. "Which is why, if this goes forward, we would like to offer you a formal advisory seat. Independent from your marriage." The words sank in like warmth. "Independent," I repeated. "Yes," she said. "Your marriage might end. Your role here doesn't have to." I left the building an hour later with more than I'd come in with. Farah texted me as I walked to my car. "Farah, he's rattled. Expect calls. Don't engage emotionally. Let the documents speak." I sat in the driver's seat and stared at my phone. There were already 3 missed calls from Daniel and a barrage of messages. "Daniel, what the hell was that? Daniel, you humiliated me. Daniel, they're reconsidering. You might have just blown our shot. Daniel, answer me." I thought about the life I had been building quietly over the last 2 weeks. The job, the apartment, the advisory seat. The lawyer who saw me as an asset, not an accessory. I typed slowly. "Me. I did not humiliate you. I told the truth. If the truth threatens your shot, maybe the foundation wasn't as strong as you thought." He replied almost immediately. "Daniel, don't do this. We have kids. You're overreacting. We can fix it. Just come home and we'll talk." Home. The word felt less like a sanctuary and more like a stage we'd been performing on. I thought of Ava watching me, learning what to accept. I thought of Leo repeating little jokes he heard his father make, not understanding yet that jokes shape reality. I typed again. "Me. I will always be there for the kids. That doesn't mean I have to stay married to a man who sees me as pointless." 3 dots. Then nothing. I put my phone face down on the passenger seat. For the first time in years, I did not rush to soothe his ego, to smooth the conflict, to make myself smaller so he could feel bigger. Instead, I drove to the new apartment. The building's lobby smelled faintly of eucalyptus and something clean. The elevator ride up was quiet, just my reflection in the mirrored walls. A woman in a simple blouse and jeans, hair pulled back, eyes clear. The apartment door opened onto light. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed the city, its chaos reduced to a silent, moving painting. The furniture was modern and minimal, soft grey sofa, glass coffee table, a kitchen with marble counters that felt cool under my fingertips. I walked from room to room slowly. A bedroom with a bed that felt both too big and exactly right. A second room that could become a space for the kids when they stayed with me. A small office with a desk facing the window. I set my bag down there, placed my laptop on the desk, and opened it. An email from Elena was waiting. "We formally propose that your advisory role be written into the term sheet. Vivet also made it clear that our confidence in this investment rests partly on your continued involvement. Separate from that, I hope you'll consider joining our network of women founders and investors. Your story is, unfortunately, common. It could help others." I read it twice, then 3 times. The knot that had lived under my ribcage for years loosened. I replied, "Yes, I'd like that." I closed the laptop and stepped out onto the balcony. The wind was cool against my face. Below, cars threaded through streets. People moved in ant-trails between buildings. The life I'd been living, school runs, grocery lists, heat-and-eat dinners, was still there. Threads I would continue to hold for Ava and Leo. But there was a new thread now. One ID picked up on a Sunday afternoon, when the man I married decided to tell the world I was pointless. I thought of that moment at the brunch table, the way my hand had tightened around the juice pitcher. The part of me that had sat down inside and gone quiet. She was standing now. I leaned on the balcony railing, letting the city's hum rise up around me. They had called me pointless on Mother's Day. 2 weeks later, I had a contract, an apartment with a view, a seat at the table where decisions were made, and a lawyer who treated my quiet archives like the weapons they were. This wasn't the end of my story. 2 more great stories are next. Don't miss them. Subscribe and turn on notifications.